Listen carefully, chosen one. This was not random. This message did not find you by accident. There is a reason your spirit became restless. There is a reason certain doors suddenly closed. There is a reason people walked away, plans failed, and everything you thought would happen stopped. You called it rejection, but heaven called it protection. God is speaking to you right now. My child, I rerouted it 3 times because you could not see what I saw. There were traps hidden behind opportunities. There were smiles hiding betrayal. There were paths that looked successful but would have destroyed your peace, your purpose, and your destiny. You kept asking, why is this taking so long? Why did everything fall apart? Why does it feel like I'm being delayed? But God says, you are not delayed. You are being redirected. Sometimes the greatest blessing is not what God gives you. It is what He refuses to let you touch. Chosen one, hear this deeply. The enemy thought frustration would make you quit. He thought confusion would weaken your faith. He thought isolation would silence your calling. But what he did not understand is this. God was using every detour to build your discernment. Every disappointment was training your spirit. Every closed door was heaven shouting, "Not this way." You almost begged for things that would have broken you. You almost chased people assigned to drain you. You almost entered rooms where your soul would have suffocated. But God intervened 3 times. The first time, He warned you quietly. You ignored the uneasiness in your spirit. The second time, He allowed the situation to collapse. You cried, but heaven was protecting you. The third time, He completely removed it, and now you finally understand. Some endings are divine rescue missions. Chosen one. Stop mourning what God removed. You are crying over what heaven blocked. You are grieving over battles you never had to fight because God stepped in before destruction reached you. Do not confuse silence with abandonment. God was working behind the scenes the entire time. Right now, while you feel uncertain, God is rearranging people, repositioning opportunities, breaking spiritual chains, and preparing a path that aligns with your assignment. The reason the enemy attacked you so heavily is because your future carries power. There is oil on your life. There is purpose in your pain. There is an anointing forming through every setback you survived. The storms did not come to destroy you. They came to reveal who you truly are. You were never ordinary. That is why betrayal hit differently. That is why isolation felt heavier. That is why your battles seemed constant. Hell does not fight empty vessels. And
God says,
chosen one, stop doubting yourself because of the season you survived. The warfare was proof that your destiny is dangerous to darkness. Listen carefully. Some people cannot go where God is taking you. Some habits cannot survive in your next season. Some versions of yourself must die so the real you can rise. This next chapter requires obedience, not fear, faith, not panic, discernment, not desperation. Do not run back to what God saved you from. The pain taught you. The delay protected you. The rerouting preserved your destiny. And now heaven is saying, prepare yourself. Because what is coming will make the confusion make sense. The waiting will make sense. The heartbreak will make sense. The isolation will make sense. One day you will thank God for every closed door. You will realize that if He had allowed your old plans to work, you would have missed your real assignment. Chosen 1. You are entering a season where clarity replaces confusion, where peace replaces chaos, where divine alignment replaces forced relationships. Stay spiritually awake. Protect your energy. Pray before every decision, and never ignore the warning signs God places in your spirit again, because this next move is sacred, and God is saying one final thing to you tonight. I rerouted it because I love you. I blocked it because I chose you. And I preserved you because your story is not over. Your breakthrough is closer than you think. Do not quit now. There are moments in life when everything suddenly changes without warning. One day the path seems clear, the plans feel solid, and the future appears certain, but then everything stops. Doors begin to close. Conversations shift. Opportunities disappear. People who once promised loyalty suddenly become distant. The very thing you prayed for begins to fall apart right in front of your eyes. In those moments, the human mind immediately searches for answers. Fear starts speaking louder than faith. Confusion clouds discernment. You begin wondering if you failed, if you missed your chance, or if God abandoned you in the middle of your process. But there are interruptions that do not come from failure. There are interruptions that come directly from heaven. Sometimes God interrupts a path because destruction is hidden behind what looks successful. What appears beautiful to human eyes may carry spiritual danger underneath it. A door can look perfect while secretly leading you away from peace, purpose, and destiny. Many people only trust what they can see, but God sees beyond appearances. He sees motives hidden in people's hearts. He sees betrayal before it manifests. He sees traps disguised as opportunities. He sees what tomorrow holds, while humanity only understands today. That is why divine interruption often feels painful in the moment. Human emotions become attached to things that God already knows cannot survive your future. The interruption was not punishment. It was protection. There are people listening to this message right now who have spent months grieving over something God intentionally blocked. You called it bad timing, but heaven called it mercy. You thought your prayers were being ignored, but in reality, God was saving you from consequences you could not yet understand. Sometimes the greatest act of love is not God giving you what you asked for. Sometimes the greatest act of love is Him refusing to allow certain doors to open at all. Holy Bible teaches repeatedly that God directs the steps of those He calls, even when they do not fully understand the direction at first. The difficult part about divine interruption is that it rarely makes sense immediately. Most people expect God's guidance to feel comfortable, peaceful, and easy to understand, but often, His protection arrives through disruption. He shakes what you depended on. He removes what distracted you. He allows instability to reveal what was never secure in the first place. The interruption exposes illusions. It reveals where your trust was misplaced. It uncovers attachments that quietly became idols inside your heart. You kept asking God for clarity while still holding on to things He was trying to remove. There are seasons when God will intentionally slow your life down because your spirit is moving faster than your wisdom. You may think you are ready for certain relationships, opportunities, or responsibilities, but heaven sees fractures inside you that still need healing. God understands that unhealed wounds can sabotage future blessings. If He released everything too early, your own pain could destroy what He intended to prosper. That is why divine interruption is often connected to preparation. God is not only protecting you from external danger, He is also protecting you from becoming unprepared for what is ahead. Many chosen ones mistake interruption for abandonment because they expected destiny to arrive without resistance. But throughout spiritual history, interruption has always been part of divine alignment. Moses thought his journey was leading one way before God redirected him into the wilderness. Joseph experienced betrayal, imprisonment, and delay before reaching his assignment. Jonah ran toward his own plans while God interrupted his direction completely. What felt like chaos was actually redirection. What felt like delay was divine positioning. Chosen one, there are interruptions happening in your life right now that your future self will eventually thank God for. The relationship that collapsed may have been draining your calling. The opportunity that disappeared may have carried hidden destruction. The environment that rejected you may have been suffocating your spiritual growth. Sometimes God allows discomfort because comfort was keeping you trapped somewhere, too small for your assignment. People often pray for elevation without understanding what elevation requires. Higher levels demand greater discernment. Greater purpose attracts greater warfare. The enemy studies patterns, weaknesses, emotional wounds, and distractions. Not every attack arrives looking dangerous. Some attacks arrive disguised as love, success, validation, or quick opportunity. This is why divine interruption becomes necessary. God will disturb what threatens your future before it fully reaches you. The interruption may have looked unfair, but heaven was seeing a battle you could not yet perceive. There are moments when your spirit sensed something was wrong, even though everything looked correct externally. That discomfort was not anxiety alone. Sometimes it was discernment trying to warn you before your mind caught up. God often speaks quietly before He acts loudly. He sends signals through uneasiness, repeated delays, closed conversations, disrupted plans, and unexplained shifts. Many ignore those warnings because they are emotionally attached to outcomes they already decided they wanted. But God refuses to bless what would ultimately break you. There are people who are angry because life did not unfold according to their timeline, but timing itself can become an act of divine mercy. If certain doors had opened too early, you would have entered them with the wrong mindset, wrong motives, or wrong people attached to your destiny. Delay is frustrating when you only see the present moment, but heaven operates from eternal perspective. God is never reacting emotionally the way humans do. He is orchestrating details across seasons, connections, and spiritual battles that human understanding cannot fully comprehend. The interruption also exposes who truly trusts God and who only trusts outcomes. Faith becomes real when plans collapse. Anyone can praise during visible progress, but true spiritual maturity develops when clarity disappears. and obedience is still required. The interruption forces you to confront what controls your heart. It reveals whether your identity depended on success, relationships, status, or validation. God will never allow temporary things to permanently define the identity of a chosen one. That is why some storms arrived without warning. They were separating you from versions of yourself that could not follow you into your next season. Pride had to break. Dependency had to break. Fear had to break. Illusions had to break. The interruption was not sent to destroy your life. It was sent to awaken your spirit. There are divine interruptions happening right now that are rearranging your future in ways you cannot yet see. Conversations are shifting behind closed doors. People are being removed from your path. New alignments are quietly forming. God is redirecting your steps. Even while confusion tries to convince you that nothing is happening, spiritual transformation rarely looks dramatic in the beginning. Sometimes it begins with silence. Sometimes it begins with endings. Sometimes it begins with a door closing so suddenly that you are forced to stop and finally listen to the voice of God instead of the noise of your emotions. There are moments when life keeps pushing you away from the same direction over and over again. You try once and the door closes. You try again with more effort, more prayer, more determination, yet something still blocks the path. Then a third time comes, and instead of progress, everything completely collapses. At first, it feels frustrating. It feels unfair. You begin questioning yourself, questioning people, even questioning God. But what if those repeated interruptions were not obstacles meant to harm you? What if they were warnings designed to save you? What if heaven rerouted you multiple times because danger was hidden behind what you desperately wanted? Most people only recognize blessings when doors open, but spiritually mature people eventually learn that closed doors can carry just as much mercy as open ones. God does not only guide through provision, He also guides through prevention. He protects through denial. He redirects through interruption. The problem is that human emotions become deeply attached to outcomes before understanding whether those outcomes are truly aligned with divine purpose. Once the heart becomes emotionally invested, discernment becomes difficult. People start calling dangerous things meant to be, simply because they desire them intensely. But desire alone does not mean destiny. There are individuals listening to this message who experienced the same pattern repeatedly. You kept trying to force a relationship, but something always disrupted it. You kept chasing an opportunity, but unexpected setbacks continued appearing. You kept returning to environments that consistently drained your peace, yet every attempt to stay eventually collapsed. You thought life was fighting against you, but heaven may have been fighting for you. God saw what your emotions refused to see. The first reroute usually comes gently. God whispers before He shakes things. He sends quiet warnings through your spirit. You feel uneasiness you cannot explain. Certain conversations leave your soul unsettled. Delays begin appearing unexpectedly. You notice inconsistencies that disturb your peace. Deep inside, something feels off, even while your mind tries to justify everything. This is often the earliest stage of divine protection. God tries to redirect you softly because He prefers obedience over destruction. Holy Bible repeatedly shows that God speaks through wisdom, discernment, and spiritual prompting before larger consequences unfold. But many people ignore the first reroute because emotions are louder than discernment. The second reroute becomes stronger. What was once a quiet warning now becomes visible disruption. Plans begin collapsing unexpectedly. Communication changes. Circumstances shift rapidly. What seemed stable suddenly becomes unstable. At this stage, frustration usually increases because people still believe persistence alone can force destiny into existence. Society teaches that every closed door should be pushed harder, but spiritually, not every closed door is meant to be opened. Some doors are locked by God Himself. Chosen one, understand this carefully. Persistence without discernment can lead directly into destruction. Many people pray for signs while simultaneously resisting every sign they receive. They ask God for guidance, but when guidance arrives through inconvenience, they reject it. They only recognize divine movement when it aligns with their personal desires. Yet, heaven often protects through discomfort. God may allow confusion temporarily because clarity would not stop you from pursuing something emotionally addictive. Sometimes only collapse can break unhealthy attachment. The third reroute is usually the strongest because God knows the danger ahead is serious. By this point, He no longer allows partial interruption. He removes the situation completely. Relationships end suddenly. Opportunities disappear entirely. Entire seasons close without warning. It feels devastating because the attachment was deep. But many chosen ones later discover that the third reroute saved them from irreversible damage. Some of the people you cried over would have shattered your peace permanently. Some opportunities would have connected you to environments that slowly destroyed your spirit. Some paths looked successful externally, but carried hidden warfare internally. God saw future consequences while you only saw temporary excitement. His protection operated beyond your limited perspective. There are spiritual battles surrounding destiny that human eyes cannot always recognize immediately. Not every attractive opportunity carries divine assignment. Not every person who enters your life carries godly intentions. The enemy understands purpose, and because of that, distraction often arrives, wrapped in beauty, comfort, validation, or urgency. That is why discernment becomes essential for every chosen one. King Solomon prayed specifically for wisdom and discernment because spiritual survival requires more than emotion. One of the hardest truths to accept is that God sometimes blocks the very thing you begged Him for. Human beings naturally assume that answered prayer always means receiving exactly what they requested. But heaven operates differently. Sometimes unanswered prayers are actually answered through protection. God may deny access to things that would eventually wound your heart, delay your purpose, or corrupt your spirit. At first, denial feels painful because humans measure events emotionally. God measures them eternally. The reroutes were not random accidents. They were intentional acts of preservation. There are people who survived emotional devastation only because God disrupted certain plans before they fully unfolded. There are individuals who avoided betrayal, financial ruin, spiritual oppression, or emotional destruction because heaven intervened repeatedly. Yet during the process, they interpreted protection as punishment. They became angry at delays that were actually shielding them from future regret. Chosen one, you must understand that God sees entire timelines at once. He knows where every road eventually leads. Humans only see moments, but heaven sees outcomes. What you call disappointment may actually be redirection towards something healthier, wiser, and more aligned with your true assignment. The pain of rerouting often intensifies when pride becomes involved. Sometimes people continue pursuing closed doors because they already announced their plans publicly. They fear embarrassment more than destruction. They would rather force broken situations than admit they were wrong. But spiritual maturity requires humility. Wisdom means recognizing when God is clearly saying no. There are seasons when repeated setbacks are not attacks from the enemy. Sometimes they are direct acts of divine intervention. Not every obstacle is meant to be conquered. Some obstacles are heaven's barricades, protecting you from roads that lead toward danger. The reroutes also expose where your identity has become misplaced. If your peace completely collapses every time plans change, it may reveal that your confidence depended more on outcomes than on God. Divine interruption forces people to rebuild trust at a deeper level. It teaches surrender. It develops discernment. It trains the spirit to seek alignment instead of obsession. Many chosen ones eventually look back and realize the reroutes were among the greatest blessings of their lives. The relationship they thought they needed would have destroyed them emotionally. The career path they chased would have drained their soul. The environment they fought to remain inside was secretly suffocating their growth. Time eventually revealed what emotions could not understand in the moment. God rerouted it because your future mattered too much to leave you unprotected. He saw conversations you never heard. He saw intentions hidden behind smiles. He saw spiritual attacks forming long before they reached you. He saw how certain choices would affect your purpose years later. While you were grieving temporary loss, heaven was preserving permanent destiny. And even now, there are reroutes happening around you that you still do not fully understand. Delays are positioning you differently. Unexpected endings are clearing space. Certain people are leaving because they cannot accompany you into your next season. Some opportunities are collapsing because they were connected to confusion, distraction, or hidden bondage. God is not removing things to empty your life. He is removing things that cannot survive where He is taking you. Rejection is one of the deepest pains a human being can experience. It cuts through the heart quietly but powerfully. It makes people question their worth, their identity, and even their purpose. When someone walks away, when an opportunity disappears, when a door closes, after you invested your energy, your prayers, and your hope into it, the natural reaction is to feel abandoned. Most people immediately interpret rejection as failure. They assume they were not good enough, not valuable enough, or not worthy enough to be chosen. But there are moments when rejection has absolutely nothing to do with your value. There are moments when rejection is actually divine protection wearing painful clothing. Chosen one. There are situations you cried over that heaven intentionally removed from your life. You thought people were rejecting you, but in reality, God was separating you from environments, relationships, and paths that could not carry your future. The pain felt personal because humans naturally attach identity to acceptance. Society trains people to seek validation constantly. Acceptance feels rewarding, while rejection feels humiliating. Yet spiritually, rejection can become one of the greatest rescue missions God ever performs. There are people listening right now who spent years mourning relationships that were never aligned with their destiny. You begged people to stay who secretly carried confusion, manipulation, dishonesty, or spiritual heaviness into your life. You viewed their departure as heartbreak, but heaven viewed it as deliverance. God sometimes removes people because he sees what they would eventually become in your future. Human beings judge based on present emotions, but God judges based on hidden motives and future outcomes. Holy Bible repeatedly reveals that God separates individuals from harmful influences long before the full consequences become visible. One of the most painful truths about rejection is that it often attacks the places where you already feel insecure. If someone struggles with self-worth, rejection intensifies those wounds. If someone fears abandonment, rejection awakens deep emotional pain. The enemy understands this well. He wants chosen ones to interpret rejection as proof they are unloved, forgotten, or insignificant. But heaven often uses rejection to redirect people away from counterfeit connections. Not everyone who welcomes you is assigned to you. Not everyone who praises you is meant to accompany you into your next season. Some people are only attached to temporary versions of you. They support you while you remain small, wounded, insecure, or easily controlled. But once growth begins, their comfort disappears. Growth exposes unhealthy attachments. Your transformation threatens people who benefited from your brokenness. That is why some relationships suddenly collapse when God begins elevating your discernment, confidence, and spiritual awareness. You called it betrayal. Heaven called it separation. There are opportunities that looked perfect externally, but carried hidden destruction internally. You may have prayed desperately for a certain position, environment, or partnership, but God saw what was waiting behind the scenes. He saw stress that would consume your peace. He saw compromise that would weaken your spirit. He saw distractions that would slowly disconnect you from your assignment. Sometimes, rejection is simply God refusing to allow your destiny to become trapped inside the wrong atmosphere. Many chosen ones become emotionally exhausted because they spend too much time trying to force themselves into places where they were never meant to remain. They chase acceptance from people who cannot recognize their value, because those people were never assigned to understand their calling. You cannot expect everyone to celebrate what God placed inside you. Some individuals reject you simply because your presence exposes areas they refuse to confront within themselves. Jesus Christ himself experienced rejection repeatedly, despite carrying divine purpose. He was misunderstood, doubted, mocked, and abandoned by many people around him. Rejection did not cancel his assignment. In many ways, rejection revealed it. Throughout spiritual history, individuals chosen for greater purpose often walked through seasons where human approval disappeared. So, dependence on God could deepen. The dangerous part about rejection is that unresolved pain can distort perception. Some people become bitter, others become desperate for validation. Some return to unhealthy environments simply because loneliness feels unbearable. But loneliness is not always punishment. Sometimes isolation becomes protection. God may temporarily separate you from certain people because their influence conflicts with your future. There are individuals who are alive spiritually, emotionally, and even physically because God blocked relationships they desperately wanted. Some people were one decision away from years of regret. Others were close to entering partnerships that would have shattered their confidence, distracted their purpose, or drained their peace completely. Heaven saw the danger before human emotions recognized it. Rejection often reveals what your heart was depending on most. If your identity collapses every time someone walks away, it may mean your confidence became attached to human approval rather than divine identity. God will never allow the destiny of a chosen one to depend entirely on unstable human validation. People change, emotions shift, loyalty fades. But purpose cannot be built on temporary acceptance. Sometimes God allows rejection specifically to break emotional dependency. Chosen one, understand this deeply. Every closed door is not evidence of failure. Some doors close because your spirit is too valuable to remain in environments beneath your calling. You may feel overlooked now, but being overlooked can preserve you from corruption, distraction, or premature exposure. God often develops his strongest vessels in hidden seasons before revealing them publicly. There are moments when rejection becomes the very thing that pushes people toward their true assignment. Comfort keeps many individuals spiritually asleep. Acceptance inside the wrong environment can delay growth for years. Some people only discover their strength after rejection forces them to stop depending on others for identity. The pain awakens purpose. The separation sharpens discernment. The heartbreak exposes unhealthy attachments. The enemy wants you to interpret rejection emotionally only, but heaven sees it strategically. You were not rejected because you lacked value. Sometimes you were rejected because your spirit carried something incompatible with the environment around you. Light naturally disturbs darkness. Truth disturbs deception. Authenticity disturbs manipulation. Not every room will welcome your presence, because not every room benefits from your growth. There are also seasons where God allows rejection because he is preventing premature connection. Timing matters spiritually. Even healthy opportunities can become dangerous when entered too early. If your healing is incomplete, your discernment weak, or your priorities misaligned, even good things can produce painful outcomes. Delay and rejection sometimes work together as forms of preparation. You may not understand every rejection immediately, but time reveals hidden mercy. Many people eventually look back and thank God for relationships that ended, opportunities that collapsed, and plans that failed. What once felt devastating later becomes understandable. They realize certain people would have limited them, certain environments would have consumed them, certain desires would have distracted them from their real assignment. God sometimes removes what your emotions cannot release willingly. There are chosen ones grieving things that were secretly destroying their peace. You are mourning attachments that heaven intentionally severed. You are asking why someone left, while God is protecting your future from hidden pain. Some people could not accompany you because they were assigned to a different path entirely. Others were removed because their presence would interfere with your growth, obedience, or spiritual clarity. The rejection was not random. The separation was not meaningless. The closed door was not proof that God abandoned you. He was rescuing you from roads your emotions were too attached to leave behind. There is a battle surrounding every person who carries real purpose. Most people do not recognize it at first, because spiritual warfare rarely announces itself openly. It hides behind confusion, delay, temptation, distraction, fear, betrayal, exhaustion, and emotional heaviness. The enemy understands that if he can weaken your mind, distort your identity, or distract your focus, he can delay your assignment without ever needing to destroy you completely. That is why chosen ones often experience battles that feel unusually intense. Their struggles are not random. Their resistance is not meaningless. There is warfare attached to destiny. From an early stage in life, many chosen ones feel different without fully understanding why. They often experience isolation, misunderstanding, emotional sensitivity, or seasons where they feel disconnected from the people around them. Some face unusual hardship repeatedly. Others encounter constant opposition every time they try moving forward. It can feel exhausting because the attacks seem never-ending. Yet what many fail to realize is that darkness does not fight empty vessels aggressively. The intensity of warfare often reflects the significance of the calling attached to your life. The enemy studies potential. He studies purpose. He studies patterns. He watches for wounds, insecurities, loneliness, and emotional vulnerabilities. Because he understands that brokenness can become a doorway for distraction. Many chosen ones spend years believing they are simply unlucky, when in reality they are under spiritual pressure designed to weaken their confidence and delay their growth. Holy Bible repeatedly teaches that spiritual battles exist beyond what human eyes naturally perceive. The battle often begins in the mind. Thoughts become weapons. Fear whispers constantly. Doubt questions every promise. Anxiety magnifies uncertainty. The enemy wants chosen ones trapped in overthinking because confusion weakens discernment. A distracted spirit struggles to hear God clearly. That is why mental exhaustion becomes one of the enemy's favorite strategies. If he cannot destroy purpose entirely, he attempts to exhaust the person carrying it. There are individuals listening right now who have survived seasons where everything felt heavy at once. Relationships became draining. Motivation disappeared. Peace became difficult to maintain. Every attempt to move forward encountered resistance. Some days you questioned your strength entirely. Yet, despite everything, you survived. That survival itself is evidence that God preserved you through battles meant to break you. Chosen one, understand this carefully. Warfare is not proof that God abandoned you. Sometimes, warfare is evidence that your life carries significance. Job endured devastating attacks not because he lacked favor, but because his faith carried spiritual importance. David faced lions, betrayal, warfare, and opposition long before reaching the throne connected to his assignment. Paul the Apostle experienced imprisonment, persecution, and hardship while carrying a message that transformed countless lives. Purpose attracts resistance because darkness fears what obedience can produce through a surrendered life. One of the enemy's greatest strategies is isolation. He wants chosen ones disconnected emotionally and spiritually because isolation amplifies discouragement. When people feel alone, they become vulnerable to hopelessness, compromise, and despair. That is why many chosen ones experience seasons where they feel misunderstood, even by people closest to them. The loneliness becomes emotionally exhausting. You begin questioning whether anyone truly understands your struggles. But isolation can also become a place where God rebuilds identity without outside noise interfering. There are seasons where heaven intentionally allows separation because too many voices were influencing your direction. Some people around you carried doubt instead of faith. Others benefited from your weakness and felt threatened by your growth. Spiritual warfare is not always dramatic or obvious. Sometimes it operates quietly through toxic influence, manipulation, distraction, temptation, and emotional dependency. The enemy also attacks timing. He attempts to make chosen ones impatient. Impatience creates vulnerability because desperate people often make decisions outside divine timing. Many painful situations begin when individuals force doors open prematurely out of frustration, loneliness, or fear. The enemy understands that delayed purpose can frustrate people into abandoning discernment entirely. That is why waiting seasons often feel spiritually intense. Another battlefield is identity. If the enemy can convince you that you are worthless, forgotten, incapable, or permanently broken, he weakens your willingness to pursue purpose. Identity confusion keeps many chosen ones trapped in cycles of insecurity. They compare themselves constantly. They seek validation obsessively. They fear rejection deeply. Yet God never intended his people to build identity on unstable human approval. Chosen ones often experience attacks specifically designed to distort self-worth. Betrayal, criticism, abandonment, failure, and rejection can create internal wounds that affect future decisions. Some become afraid to trust. Others become afraid to step forward at all. Fear begins controlling their actions quietly. But fear was never meant to lead your destiny. Moses struggled with insecurity before accepting his assignment. He focused on his weaknesses while God focused on purpose. Many chosen ones spend years staring at flaws while heaven sees potential. The enemy magnifies imperfection because insecurity weakens obedience. Spiritual warfare also intensifies near breakthrough seasons. This is something many people fail to recognize. Right before significant growth attacks often increase. Confusion rises suddenly. Temptation becomes stronger. Unexpected setbacks appear. Emotional heaviness intensifies. The enemy becomes aggressive because he recognizes movement happening spiritually before humans fully understand it naturally. Many people quit during these seasons because they misinterpret increased warfare as proof they are failing. But resistance often means movement is occurring. Chosen one, there are battles you survived that should have destroyed your peace entirely. Some people expected you to collapse emotionally. Others expected your faith to disappear. The enemy himself believed exhaustion would silence your purpose. Yet, despite every attack, you are still standing. Wounded perhaps, tired perhaps, but still standing. God preserved you because your assignment still matters. The warfare around your life was never random chaos. It was connected to influence, purpose, and destiny. There are words inside you that can heal others. There is wisdom inside your pain that can guide others. There is strength developing through your survival that cannot be produced through comfort alone. The enemy fears healed chosen ones because healed people become dangerous to darkness. Once someone learns discernment through pain, manipulation loses power. Once someone survives rejection, fear weakens. Once someone experiences God's protection repeatedly, trust deepens beyond circumstances. That is why the attacks became personal. That is why the battles felt constant. That is why confusion tried so aggressively to invade your mind. Your future carries weight spiritually. There are environments you cannot enter casually because your presence shifts atmospheres. There are people who will encounter God through your obedience. There are assignments connected to your voice, your healing, your testimony, and your growth. The enemy understands this, which is why he tries so intensely to keep chosen ones trapped in cycles of fear, distraction, emotional exhaustion, and self-doubt. But warfare cannot cancel what God already ordained. Every battle taught discernment. Every betrayal exposed hidden motives. Every delay strengthened patience. Every storm deepened spiritual awareness. You were being trained in places where you thought you were only suffering. There comes a point in every chosen one's journey where emotions can no longer be trusted blindly. Feelings are powerful, but they are not always truthful. Desperation can disguise itself as love. Loneliness can disguise itself as destiny. Fear can disguise itself as urgency. Many people destroy their peace because they move according to emotion instead of discernment. They chase what feels good temporarily while ignoring what their spirit has been warning them about repeatedly. That is why discernment becomes one of the most important spiritual gifts a person can develop. Without discernment, people mistake distractions for blessings, manipulation for affection, and counterfeit opportunities for divine alignment. Discernment is deeper than instinct. It is the ability to sense beyond appearances. It is spiritual awareness that recognizes hidden motives, unhealthy patterns, dangerous atmospheres, and misaligned paths, even when everything looks attractive externally. Many chosen ones struggle in life not because God failed to warn them, but because they ignored the warnings while chasing what they emotionally desired. There were moments when your spirit already knew something was wrong. You felt uneasy around certain people, even though they spoke kindly. You sensed confusion around certain opportunities, even though they appeared successful. Deep inside, something kept telling you to slow down, pray, and pay attention. But desperation has a way of silencing discernment. When people become emotionally attached to outcomes, they stop listening carefully to spiritual warning signs. Chosen one understand this carefully. Desperation makes people vulnerable. A desperate person ignores red flags because they fear losing what they think they need. A desperate person settles for environments that drain peace because loneliness feels heavier than dysfunction. A desperate person forces doors open because waiting feels unbearable. The enemy understands this deeply. That is why he often attacks through emotional urgency. He wants people making rushed decisions without discernment. Holy Bible teaches repeatedly about wisdom, discernment, patience, and spiritual awareness because God understands how easily emotions can mislead people. Not everything that appears good carries God's approval. Not every open door is divine. Sometimes opportunities arrive specifically to distract, delay, or weaken purpose. Many chosen ones have experienced painful consequences simply because they ignored what God was revealing quietly. You saw inconsistencies but explained them away. You noticed dishonesty but chose denial. You sensed emotional heaviness but stayed anyway. The warnings were present from the beginning, yet desperation convinced you to keep moving forward. Discernment often speaks softly, while desperation screams loudly. That is why spiritual maturity requires slowing down enough to truly observe. Some people rush into relationships because they fear being alone. Others rush into opportunities because they fear missing out. But fear-based decisions rarely produce lasting peace. God does not lead through panic. Heaven does not manipulate through urgency. Confusion, pressure, and emotional chaos are often signs that something requires deeper discernment. One of the hardest lessons chosen ones must learn is that not everyone who enters their life carries good intentions. Some people arrive carrying hidden jealousy, manipulation, emotional instability, or spiritual heaviness. Yet because these individuals often appear charming initially, many ignore discernment completely. The enemy rarely sends destruction in obvious form. Counterfeit people usually arrive, appearing supportive, attractive, helpful, or understanding. Their true influence only becomes visible later. Samson possessed incredible strength, but lacked discernment in key relationships, and that weakness ultimately created devastating consequences. Many gifted individuals lose peace not because they lack talent or purpose, but because they ignore discernment while emotionally attached to the wrong influences. Discernment protects more than relationships. It protects timing, decisions, environments, and spiritual health. There are places where your spirit immediately feels drained, even if nothing visibly wrong occurs. There are conversations that leave confusion lingering afterward. There are situations where peace disappears the moment you become involved. Chosen ones must learn to stop dismissing those signals. Your spirit recognizes things before your mind fully understands them. Many people ask God for signs while simultaneously ignoring the signs already surrounding them. Repeated delays, inner uneasiness, unexpected disruptions, and lack of peace often reveal that heaven is trying to redirect your steps. But desperation interprets every delay as an obstacle instead of possible protection. It keeps trying to force situations that God keeps interrupting. Chosen one, not every battle is meant to be fought. Some situations are warnings telling you to walk away. Discernment also requires honesty with yourself. Sometimes people already know the truth internally, but refuse to accept it emotionally. Acceptance requires surrender, and surrender can feel painful when attachments run deep. It is easier for some individuals to stay inside unhealthy situations than confront loneliness, disappointment, or change. But temporary comfort can produce long-term destruction. The enemy loves emotionally starved people because emotional starvation weakens discernment. When someone feels unloved, unseen, or empty internally, they become vulnerable to counterfeit affection. They cling to attention even when it carries toxicity underneath. That is why healing matters spiritually. Unhealed wounds distort perception. Brokenness can make dysfunction feel familiar, and familiarity often feels falsely comforting. God sometimes allows painful endings specifically to sharpen discernment. Betrayal teaches observation. Manipulation teaches caution. Rejection teaches self-worth beyond human approval. Delays teach patience. The lessons hurt, but they develop wisdom that emotional comfort alone could never produce. There are chosen ones listening right now who ignored warning signs because they feared losing people, opportunities, or dreams. You kept giving chances after discernment already warned you repeatedly. You kept returning to environments that exhausted your spirit because emotional attachment clouded wisdom. Yet despite everything, God continued protecting you through interruptions, reroutes, and closed doors. The development of discernment changes how a person moves through life. Instead of chasing every opportunity impulsively, you begin seeking peace before proceeding. Instead of trusting appearances blindly, you observe character carefully. Instead of forcing outcomes desperately, you learn patience. Discernment teaches restraint. It teaches spiritual listening. It teaches awareness beyond surface-level emotion. King Solomon understood the value of wisdom deeply. Wisdom and discernment preserve destiny because they help people recognize danger before destruction fully unfolds. Many painful seasons could have been shortened if discernment had been obeyed earlier. Chosen one, God has been teaching you to trust what your spirit senses instead of only what your emotions crave. Some situations looked perfect externally while carrying hidden confusion internally. Some people spoke beautifully while carrying destructive intentions quietly. Some paths seemed exciting but lacked peace completely. Peace matters spiritually. God's guidance does not always remove challenge, but it carries clarity beneath difficulty. Desperation creates emotional chaos. Discernment creates spiritual awareness. One pushes impulsively. The other listens carefully. The painful experiences you survived were not meaningless. They trained your perception. You began recognizing patterns faster. You started noticing inconsistencies earlier. You became more sensitive to environments that drain your peace. The storms sharpened your spiritual vision. Now you understand why certain doors had to close. Now you understand why repeated warnings kept appearing. Now you understand why God interrupted paths you desperately wanted. Discernment was trying to preserve your future, while desperation was trying to satisfy temporary emotion. And every lesson, every heartbreak, every delay, and every reroute was teaching you how to recognize God's voice above the noise of fear, loneliness, pressure, and emotional urgency. There are seasons in life when everything becomes quiet at the same time. The phone stops ringing the way it used to. Certain friendships fade unexpectedly. Invitations disappear. Support becomes limited. Even the people who once promised they would always stay begin drifting away slowly. At first, the silence feels painful. It feels confusing and deeply personal. You begin wondering if you did something wrong, if people secretly dislike you, or if God abandoned you completely. But many chosen ones eventually discover that isolation is not always punishment. Sometimes isolation is preparation. God often separates people before He transforms them. The difficult truth is that growth requires space. Transformation cannot fully happen while constant noise surrounds your spirit. Too many voices create confusion. Too many distractions weaken discernment. Too many unhealthy attachments interfere with healing. That is why heaven sometimes removes chosen ones from environments, relationships, and routines that once felt comfortable. The separation hurts because humans naturally crave connection. But spiritually, isolation can become one of the most powerful seasons of inner rebuilding. Many people misunderstand isolation because they only focus on the loneliness attached to it. They do not realize that some forms of separation are actually divine protection. God knows when environments are slowing your growth. He sees when relationships are draining your peace. He recognizes when constant outside influence is preventing spiritual maturity. Isolation creates room for clarity. It exposes emotional dependency. It reveals who you are when external validation disappears. Chosen one. There are things God can only teach you in hidden seasons. Holy Bible repeatedly shows that many individuals called for greater purpose walked through wilderness seasons before stepping into assignment. Moses spent years isolated in the wilderness before leading people toward freedom. Elijah's experienced seasons of hiding and solitude, while God strengthened him spiritually. Jesus Christ himself withdrew into the wilderness before major moments connected to his ministry. Isolation has always been connected to preparation, refinement, and spiritual strengthening. The problem is that human beings often resist isolation because silence exposes unresolved pain. When distractions disappear, buried emotions surface, old wounds become visible, insecurities become harder to avoid. Loneliness forces confrontation with the parts of yourself that constant busyness once covered up. Many chosen ones spend years distracting themselves from healing because noise feels easier than self-examination. But God loves you too much to let hidden wounds control your future indefinitely. There are seasons where heaven intentionally slows your life down because internal healing matters more than external success. You may want immediate progress, visible blessings, or restored relationships. But God understands that broken foundations cannot support lasting purpose. Unhealed trauma affects discernment. Emotional wounds distort relationships. Insecurity weakens obedience. Fear delays destiny. That is why testing seasons become necessary. Testing reveals what comfort hides. Pressure exposes where trust is weak. Delays expose impatience. Rejection exposes dependency on human approval. Isolation exposes emotional attachments. God allows certain tests not to destroy chosen ones, but to reveal areas that still require healing, growth, and surrender. Many people think testing means God is angry with them, but spiritually, testing often means development is happening. Gold is refined through fire because impurities must rise to the surface before purification occurs. In the same way, difficult seasons expose hidden pride, fear, bitterness, insecurity, and emotional dependency that comfort never revealed clearly. Chosen one. Your isolation was not meaningless suffering. There were habits God needed to break. There were mindsets that could not follow you into your next season. There were emotional chains that had to weaken before freedom became possible. Some people had become idols emotionally. Their approval controlled your peace. Their presence controlled your confidence. Their attention controlled your emotions. Isolation exposed how deeply attached you had become to unstable human validation. God will never allow the identity of a chosen one to remain completely dependent on people. The silence also teaches discernment. During noisy seasons, it becomes difficult to hear spiritual direction clearly. Constant opinions, social pressure, emotional drama, and outside influence create confusion internally. Isolation removes many distractions, so your spirit can become more sensitive to God's voice again. There are individuals listening right now who hated their lonely season while they were inside it, but later realized it saved their life spiritually. Some relationships had become toxic. Some environments were emotionally suffocating. Some habits were slowly destroying peace internally. Yet, because attachment was strong, separation felt unbearable initially. God had to remove you before those environments fully consumed your identity. Testing seasons also reveal who genuinely supports you. Hard seasons expose shallow loyalty quickly. Some people only remain present while your life appears beneficial, exciting, or emotionally convenient for them. But when isolation begins, masks fall away. Temporary connections fade. Superficial relationships disappear. The painful part is realizing how many people were attached to your accessibility rather than your well-being. Still, even those losses carried lessons. The isolation taught you how to stand emotionally without constant reassurance. It taught you how to seek God before seeking approval. It taught you how to survive disappointment without collapsing completely. Chosen ones often discover their real strength during seasons where external support becomes limited. Joseph experienced betrayal, separation, imprisonment, and loneliness long before stepping into the position connected to his destiny. The isolation was painful, but it developed wisdom, endurance, humility, and spiritual maturity that comfort alone could never produce. One of the enemy's greatest attacks during isolated seasons is hopelessness. He wants chosen ones believing the loneliness will last forever. He whispers that they are forgotten, unloved, abandoned, and permanently disconnected. But isolation is not permanent abandonment when God is involved. Sometimes separation is temporary, preparation for greater alignment ahead. The hidden work happening inside you matters deeply. Your discernment became sharper through silence. Your standards became healthier through heartbreak. Your dependence on God deepened through uncertainty. Your emotional strength developed through survival. There are things you understand now that comfort could never have taught you. You recognize manipulation faster. You notice red flags earlier. You value peace differently. You no longer chase every opportunity or every relationship impulsively, because testing taught caution and wisdom. The isolation also forced honesty. You had to confront fears you once ignored. You had to acknowledge wounds you once hid. You had to face unhealthy patterns without distractions constantly numbing the pain. Healing became uncomfortable because real healing requires truth. Chosen one, God was not trying to destroy you in the wilderness. He was rebuilding you privately before exposing you publicly. Some people cannot accompany you into your next season because they only knew the wounded version of you. They were comfortable while you lacked boundaries, discernment, and confidence. But growth changes relationship dynamics. Healing changes tolerance levels. Spiritual maturity changes priorities. That is why certain connections faded naturally during your transformation process. The season of testing was separating who you were from who God is calling you to become. Every lonely night, every painful realization, every closed door, and every silent season was shaping your spirit in ways you could not fully recognize while living through it. One of the hardest realities a chosen one must eventually accept is that not everyone is meant to stay forever. Some people enter your life for a season, some for a lesson, and only a few are truly aligned with your long-term purpose. Yet human emotions often resist this truth. People become attached to familiarity, even when that familiarity is damaging their peace. They hold on to relationships, environments, habits, and identities long after God has been trying to remove them. That's why certain separations become necessary. Not because God enjoys watching people suffer, but because destiny cannot fully unfold, while unhealthy attachments continue controlling the heart. There are individuals listening right now who are still grieving over things heaven intentionally removed. You keep replaying conversations, memories, and endings inside your mind, wondering why everything changed so suddenly. But what if those removals were not destruction? What if they were divine separation designed to protect your future? What if God saw that certain people and paths could not accompany you into the next chapter of your life? Chosen one, some connections feel emotionally powerful while being spiritually dangerous. The enemy rarely attacks openly in the beginning. Counterfeit relationships often arrive carrying excitement, comfort, validation, or emotional intensity. At first, everything feels meaningful. You feel understood, wanted, or emotionally connected. But over time, confusion enters. Peace weakens. Discernment becomes clouded. Emotional exhaustion increases. Yet, because attachment has already formed, many people continue ignoring warning signs. God sees beyond appearances. He sees hidden motives, hidden jealousy, hidden manipulation, and hidden spiritual heaviness that human emotions often overlook. Holy Bible repeatedly demonstrates that separation is sometimes necessary for protection, growth, and alignment with divine purpose. Throughout spiritual history, God often removed people from environments that could no longer support their assignment. Many chosen ones struggle because they confuse attachment with alignment. Just because someone has history with you does not mean they have destiny with you. Some people are connected to old versions of you that God is trying to transform. They were comfortable while you remained insecure, emotionally dependent, easily manipulated, or spiritually distracted. But growth changes relationships. Healing changes dynamics. Boundaries expose unhealthy intentions. That is why certain people became uncomfortable once you started changing. When God begins elevating discernment inside a chosen one, toxic environments stop feeling normal. You begin noticing patterns you once ignored. You become sensitive to manipulation, negativity, dishonesty, emotional inconsistency, and draining energy. What once felt acceptable now disturbs your peace deeply. The transformation creates separation naturally, because your spirit no longer agrees with what it once tolerated. Some people had to leave because they benefited from your brokenness. That truth is painful but necessary to understand. Certain individuals only felt powerful while you lacked confidence. They preferred you emotionally dependent because dependency gave them control. Others enjoyed your generosity while offering little support in return. Some celebrated your struggles quietly because your weakness made them feel more secure about themselves. Healing threatens unhealthy connections. Once God begins rebuilding identity, chosen ones stop settling for relationships rooted in manipulation, disrespect, emotional instability, or spiritual confusion. They begin recognizing their value differently. They stop chasing people who repeatedly drain their peace. They stop forcing connections that require constant self-betrayal to maintain. But separation still hurts because the heart remembers emotional investment, shared experiences, and hopes attached to people. Humans naturally grieve endings, even necessary ones. That grief does not always mean the separation was wrong. Sometimes, grief simply reflects attachment, releasing slowly. There are also paths God removes because they conflict with your assignment. Some opportunities look successful externally, but carry hidden compromise internally. Certain environments slowly weaken your spiritual clarity. Some ambitions appear exciting, but lead away from peace, purpose, and alignment. Chosen ones often experience painful reroutes because God refuses to allow temporary desires to permanently derail destiny. Abraham was called to leave familiar surroundings behind before stepping into the promise connected to his future. Separation became necessary before alignment could fully unfold. Many people want growth without leaving environments attached to stagnation. But transformation requires movement. Chosen one, understand this deeply. Not every closed chapter is punishment. Some chapters close because your spirit has outgrown them. There are friendships that cannot survive your healing because they were built around shared dysfunction. There are environments that reject your growth because your transformation exposes unhealthy patterns around you. There are relationships that become unstable once you stop tolerating disrespect. The enemy wants chosen ones trapped in guilt, so they continue carrying connections God already told them to release. Sometimes people leave because your calling makes them uncomfortable. Light naturally exposes darkness. Authenticity exposes manipulation. Spiritual growth exposes emotional immaturity. Some individuals distance themselves because your evolution confronts areas they refuse to heal within themselves. Not everyone wants truth. Not everyone wants growth. Some people prefer environments where dysfunction remains unchallenged. That is why God sometimes removes chosen ones from familiar circles entirely. The old environment cannot support the new version of who they are becoming. The removals also teach dependence on God instead of dependence on people. Many chosen ones unknowingly build emotional security around unstable human relationships. Their peace rises and falls based on how others treat them. Their confidence depends on attention, reassurance, and acceptance. But God will not allow your identity to remain trapped inside human approval forever. So He removes supports that became unhealthy dependencies. The process feels painful because emotional attachments do not break easily. There are nights when loneliness feels overwhelming. There are moments when you question whether the separation was necessary. But over time, clarity begins emerging. You start recognizing how exhausted your spirit became in certain environments. You realize how much energy was spent maintaining connections that constantly disrupted your peace. The removals were creating room for healthier alignment. There are people assigned to your future who will not require you to abandon your boundaries, silence your discernment, or shrink your spirit to maintain connection. God removes counterfeit relationships because they block space needed for genuine alignment. But many chosen ones hold on to old attachments so tightly that new seasons cannot fully enter. Sometimes God removes paths because they were too small for where your destiny is heading. You may have settled emotionally for survival, while heaven prepared you for purpose. You may have become comfortable inside environments that limited your growth, because fear made familiarity feel safer than transformation. But God refuses to let a chosen one remain permanently trapped inside places connected to stagnation. Every removal carried purpose. The people who left taught lessons. The environments that collapsed revealed truth. The opportunities that disappeared redirected your path. The endings exposed what no longer aligned with your future. Even now, there are separations happening around you that are positioning your life differently. Certain conversations feel distant because alignment is shifting. Certain doors are closing because they cannot accompany you into your next season. Some people are fading because their assignment in your life has ended. And although the removals wounded your heart temporarily, God understood that keeping everything the same would have wounded your destiny permanently. There comes a moment after every painful season, when everything slowly begins making sense. The confusion that once consumed your mind starts clearing. The heartbreak that once felt unbearable no longer controls your emotions the same way. The delays, the reroutes, the isolation, the rejection, and the removals begin connecting together like pieces of a larger picture you could not fully understand before. This is the season of alignment, the season where God starts revealing why certain doors had to close, why certain people had to leave, and why your path could not continue the way you originally planned. Alignment does not happen accidentally. It happens after refinement. Many chosen ones imagine purpose, arriving suddenly with immediate clarity, but heaven usually prepares people privately before positioning them publicly. God understands that destiny without preparation can destroy a person emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. That is why the previous seasons were necessary. The pain developed discernment. The waiting developed patience. The rejection developed identity. The isolation developed spiritual depth. Every difficult season was shaping you into someone capable of carrying what is next. Chosen one, you are not entering this next chapter as the same person you once were. The old version of you reacted emotionally to every setback. The old version of you chased approval, feared loneliness, ignored red flags, and questioned your worth whenever doors closed unexpectedly. But the storms changed you. You learned how to survive disappointment without collapsing completely. You learned how to recognize manipulation faster. You learned how to protect your peace instead of sacrificing it constantly for acceptance. Growth changed your spirit. That is why alignment feels different from desperation. In past seasons, you forced things. You chased people. You ignored warning signs because emotional attachment clouded discernment. But alignment carries peace beneath uncertainty. Even when the future is not fully visible yet, your spirit no longer feels controlled by panic the same way. Holy Bible repeatedly reveals that God positions individuals carefully before major assignments unfold. Joseph experienced betrayal, imprisonment, false accusations, and delay before finally stepping into the position connected to his purpose. Every painful stage prepared him for the responsibility ahead. If elevation had arrived too early, the weight of the assignment could have crushed him. Many chosen ones wanted blessings while still carrying mindsets that would have sabotaged those blessings. Some wanted healthy relationships without healing emotional wounds first. Others wanted influence without discipline. Some desired purpose without surrender. But God cares more about your readiness than your impatience. Requires internal transformation. That is why heaven allowed uncomfortable seasons to continue longer than you expected. Certain lessons needed to become permanent inside your spirit. God was teaching boundaries because your heart once lacked them. He was teaching discernment because you trusted appearances too easily. He was teaching patience because desperation once controlled your decisions. Now you recognize things differently. You no longer chase every opportunity impulsively. You no longer beg people to stay. You no longer ignore your spirit just to avoid loneliness. The old patterns are breaking. because growth happened through survival. Alignment also means that what once confused you no longer fits naturally into your life. Certain conversations feel empty now. Certain environments feel draining immediately. Certain habits no longer satisfy your spirit. This shift can feel strange because your identity is changing internally. Things connected to your old season begin losing their emotional power over you. God removes appetite for what no longer aligns. There are people who once controlled your emotions completely, but now you see them with clarity instead of obsession. There are situations you once desperately wanted, but now you understand why heaven blocked them repeatedly. Healing changes perspective. Spiritual maturity changes priorities. Chosen one. This next chapter is not about returning to old cycles with better intentions. It is about walking differently because wisdom was developed through pain. The enemy often attacks hardest right before alignment becomes visible. Confusion increases suddenly. Old temptations reappear. Familiar distractions attempt to regain access to your attention. Past relationships sometimes return unexpectedly. Why? Because darkness recognizes transformation before many people do. The enemy wants chosen ones emotionally trapped in old cycles before they fully step into new alignment. That is why discernment remains essential even during breakthrough seasons. Not everything returning to your life deserves renewed access. Some doors closed for a reason. Some relationships ended because they conflicted with your growth. Some environments collapsed because they could not support your future. The temptation to revisit familiar dysfunction often intensifies before true alignment unfolds. But you are not who you used to be anymore. The storms strengthened your spiritual awareness. The betrayals sharpened your discernment. The delays deepened your patience. The isolation strengthened your dependence on God instead of unstable people. Alignment also requires obedience. Many chosen ones pray for direction while resisting the very changes heaven is requiring from them. They want new seasons while clinging emotionally to old attachments. But alignment demands surrender. God cannot fully position your future while your heart remains chained to environments He already removed you from. There are blessings connected to obedience. Some doors will only open once you fully release what God already told you to leave behind. Some peace will only arrive once emotional attachment to past seasons weakens completely. Heaven cannot pour new wine into old wineskins. Transformation requires renewal internally before manifestation externally. Peter the Apostle could not remain in the same mindset after encountering his calling. Alignment shifted his direction entirely. Many chosen ones are experiencing similar internal shifts right now. The things that once mattered most are changing. Your spirit craves peace more than performance. Authenticity matters more than appearances. Discernment matters more than emotional excitement. This is evidence that transformation is becoming permanent. There are also divine connections forming around your life now that would not have aligned with the previous version of you. God often waits until healing begins before introducing certain people, opportunities, and responsibilities. Why? Because unhealed wounds can sabotage healthy alignment. Brokenness can misinterpret genuine connection. Fear can reject opportunities sent from heaven. Now, your spirit is learning stability. You no longer need chaos to feel emotionally stimulated. You no longer mistake intensity for love. You no longer confuse attention with genuine care. Healing restored clarity. Chosen one. Your future is not being built randomly. Heaven has been positioning details behind the scenes, even during seasons where nothing appeared to make sense. Delays were arranging timing. Removals were clearing distractions. Isolation was strengthening identity. Rejection was redirecting your path. Everything was working together for alignment. There are doors ahead that will not require you to abandon your peace in order to enter them. There are relationships ahead that will not constantly confuse your spirit. There are opportunities ahead connected to purpose instead of emotional emptiness. God is leading you toward alignment that carries stability, wisdom, discernment, and peace. The season of surviving is teaching you how to walk into the season of purpose with clarity instead of desperation, with faith instead of fear, and with spiritual maturity strong enough to protect what heaven is preparing to place into your hands.